Tonight, mass murder in Cleveland. A convicted sex offender accused. 11 women found dead on his property as investigators continue to search for more victims. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the problems monitoring and tracking sex offenders. Across the country, many in law enforcement warn the system is failing. With the H1N1 vaccine so scarce, how did this clinic in Dallas get thousands of doses? Plus, they made fun of him because he's different.
How did that make you feel?
Really sad. Real sad.
Now he's out to stop bullies everywhere, and he's tonight's American Spirit.
Yes!
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. We begin tonight in Cleveland, where a mass murder case is getting more gruesome by the day. A home on Imperial Avenue on the city's east side has become a massive crime scene. Some veteran detectives say it's the worst they have ever seen. The remains of 11 women were discovered there over the past few days. Some may have been there for years. Today, police said they may start tearing down the walls to search for even more victims. Randall Pinkston is in Cleveland with more on the investigation and the suspects' first day in court.
50-year-old convicted sex offender Anthony Sowell stared straight ahead as he was described by prosecutors as an incredibly dangerous threat to the public. The judge ordered him held without bond on charges of rape, kidnapping, and 5 counts of murder, and that could just be the beginning. Police showed up at Sowell's door on the east side of Cleveland last Thursday to investigate an alleged rape. Armed with a search warrant, they found 11 dead women. 5 buried in the backyard, 5 inside the home, plus a skull in a bag in the basement.
If anybody does have anybody that's missing, we'd like to speak with them.
Outraged local residents accuse authorities of ignoring their concerns about missing women for years. 6 of Sowell's alleged victims are known to be African American. Tanya Carmichael was among the first victims to be identified with the DNA match. Her family says they tried to get Cleveland police to look for her when they found her car near Sowell's house a year ago. They believe police ignored them because Carmichael was a known drug user.
How many other women died after my mother died? And this man could have been off the streets. So I'm angry about that.
It smelled like a dead body.
City Councilman Zach Reed is calling for an independent investigation. He believes authorities should have done more to trace the source of the stench of death. The smell was erroneously believed to be coming from a sausage factory next door to Sowell's home.
Something went wrong here. You cannot have 10 bodies in one house in a residential neighborhood when the community is telling you that there is this foul smell out here.
Because he was a convicted sex offender, authorities periodically would stop by Sowell's home, and once they even came just hours before he allegedly raped someone. But authorities couldn't go inside by law. Katie?
Randall Pinkston in Cleveland tonight. Thank you, Randall. While neighbors may be wondering why Sowell wasn't caught sooner, there are some painful answers in another high-profile case, this one in California. A state investigation out today reveals widespread failures in monitoring Philip Garrido, the convicted rapist accused of keeping a young girl as his sex slave for nearly 2 decades. Bill Whitaker has more on what went wrong.
Ever since kidnapped victim J.C. Dugard was found alive this summer, outraged Californians have been asking how could it have been possible for convicted rapist Philip Garrido to hide her for 18 years in his suburban backyard, fathering 2 children with his victim, all while being closely monitored by parole agents. He even wore a GPS ankle bracelet. In a scathing report today, state investigators outlined massive missteps and missed opportunities by the Department of Corrections that prolonged J.C.'s imprisonment. From failure to adequately supervise Garrido to failure to talk to neighbors, even failure to adequately train the parole agents.
We determined that Garrido was only properly supervised 12 out of the 123 months it supervised him, a failure rate of about 90%.
Critics say the system for monitoring sex offenders is broken across the country. All 50 states have website sex offender lists for citizens to see if an offender lives near their house or a park. There are almost 700,000 registered sex offenders nationwide, but few officers to monitor them. In Florida, there are 40 sex offenders for every parole officer. In Colorado, it's 26 to 1, and that's in addition to dozens of their other cases. But the biggest problem, critics say, failure to prioritize. States monitor teens convicted of sexting, sending naked pictures of themselves over cell phones, just as they do child rapists like Garrido.
We need to separate the really bad from the not so bad and make a determination who the really bad people are.
Even worse, in many states, convicted sex offenders are only required to send in a postcard with their address once a year. As a result, some 100,000 convicted sex offenders have dropped out of the system, disappeared altogether. Still, John Walsh, whose son was abducted 28 years ago, says states are balking at complying with tough new federal laws to track and monitor sex offenders.
The system is broken, it's overwhelmed, and I think the public is starting to realize that.
Perhaps most alarming, Philip Garrido was being watched more closely than most sex offenders. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Now to the H1N1 flu. The CDC admitted today it likely won't have enough vaccine available by the time the virus peaks. The vaccine is already in high demand, but some clinics have more than they should have. Much more. Here's Don Teague.
Weeks late, and with only a third of the doses expected, Dallas County began mass vaccination of high-risk residents against H1N1 flu today.
I've been waiting since they started announcing they were going to make these vaccines, it was a big concern for me.
It's the first free walk-in shot clinic in Dallas, but at private clinics, which can charge patients to administer their shots or nasal mist, the vaccine has been available in some cases for days or weeks. This clinic got nearly 12,000 doses last week, and despite recommendations that pregnant women and other higher-risk patients have priority, vaccinates anyone who pays the $20 fee.
This is kind of a niche that we specialize in. I've been involved in scheduling, coordinating, and providing flu shots since 1998, and we think we have a very effective model.
But state health officials say the private clinic shouldn't have received any doses of H1N1 vaccine, much less nearly 12,000. An investigation determined the owner didn't break the law, but won't receive any more doses because he misrepresented his business on a vaccine application. Jeff Vitt denies there was any wrongdoing, but critics say his clinic gamed the system.
It might be legal, but it's certainly not ethical, and it's not take care of the patients who need it most first.
Like those lined up in Dallas who couldn't get free shots until today.
County health officials say they've got enough doses to at least get through today's clinic, but say they've ordered 20,000 additional doses that still haven't come in, and they need them now.
But I'm concerned that the state allowed someone to get the vaccine who should not, in their own words, should not have gotten the vaccine in the first place.
Putting those most at risk behind those who can pay. Don Teague, CBS News, Dallas.
Turning now to the economy, the Federal Reserve announced today it's keeping a key interest rate for bank lending at a record low between 0 and 1/4%. Fed decisions like today's play a big role in how much interest Americans pay for mortgages and on their credit cards. And as Anthony Mason reports, this may just be one step on the long road to recovery.
Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke is facing some crucial decisions in the coming months as he tries to solve this Rubik's Cube of an economy.
It's extremely tricky. I mean, we haven't been here before, both in terms of the financial crisis, in terms of the policies they're engaged in.
The Fed, for example, is spending well over $1 trillion to buy up mortgage loans from banks. That allows the banks to then lend more and props up the housing market.
The Federal Reserve has been buying about 80% of all mortgage debt that's issued. Some months they've been buying 100%. Well, that program's set to end at the end of March.
Here's why that's critical. At its peak 3 years ago, nearly $2 trillion was flowing through the credit markets. This year, it's estimated to be just $150 billion. If the Fed stops buying mortgages, the cost of borrowing could quickly soar.
If the Fed does withdraw this support, what happens to interest rates?
Well, you're looking at mortgage rates that would probably spike about a full percentage point higher.
The 30-year fixed mortgage, now at a little over 5%, could jump to more than 6%. That would be bad news for the housing market, still struggling to get back on its feet.
You haven't felt any significant change yet?
Not yet.
Builder Tom DiBenedetto had 11 employees in his Nyack, New York contracting business. Now he's down to just 2. He'd like to start rehiring.
But I don't want to commit to somebody and hire them and then all of a sudden, a couple months down the line, not have work for them.
By holding down interest rates, the Fed's trying to get a fire going in the economy. But if it doesn't catch soon, Ben Bernanke may need more matches. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, an environmental disaster overseas that could be as bad as the Exxon Valdez oil spill. It could be one of the worst oil spills ever, a disaster that's playing out off the coast of Australia. For 10 weeks now, oil poured out of a crippled and burning drilling rig between Australia's northwest coast and the islands of Indonesia. The leak has finally been plugged, but as John Blackstone tells us, the damage is done.
With explosive gas spewing into the air and thousands of gallons of oil pouring into the water each day, the spill has been claiming sea snakes, birds, and dolphins.
Horror, of course, that such an accident could have occurred. And then, of course, the questions start, and that is, what caused it? What does this mean?
The blowout is thought to have been caused by a fracture in a pipe 8,000 feet beneath the seafloor. Again and again, over 2 months, the Thailand-based company that owns the rig tried and failed to plug the well.
We remain committed and resolved to achieve our goal, and that may require a few more attempts.
Just how much has spilled is uncertain. Environmental groups say satellite photos show it spread across more than 9,000 square miles and estimate some 9 million gallons have poured into the ocean, nearly as much as the 11 million that escaped from the Exxon Valdez in Alaska.
There's no cleanup technology available on Earth to clean up a spill that big.
The oil company insists the spill is much smaller, but refuses to give a number. Seabirds, whales, porpoises, and sea turtles have been reported feeding near the oil, but there's no count of wildlife killed or injured. While the spill is far away from American waters, it's come at an awkward time for those pushing for more offshore drilling in the U.S. under the slogan, "Drill, baby, drill."
Well, this is drill baby oops, what we're seeing now, and it's very tragic.
This week, just after the well was finally capped, the state-of-the-art platform exploded, bringing a spectacular end to the flow of oil, but adding fuel to the worldwide debate over offshore drilling. John Blackstone, CBS News, Sausalito, California.
In other news, today marks 30 years since the beginning of a dark episode in American history, the Iranian hostage crisis. On November 4th, 1979, student militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. Today at the old embassy building, demonstrators backed by Iran's government shouted "Death to America." But nearby, police attacked anti-government protesters who had their own chant, "Death to dictators." And in Milan, Italy, a judge convicted 23 Americans today in the alleged CIA kidnapping of a Muslim cleric from that city in 2003. The case involved what's called rendition. The cleric was taken to Egypt, where he says he was tortured. The Americans were not there for the trial, but if they ever return to Italy, they could face 5 to 8 years in prison. Up next, the impact of yesterday's elections. Now to the elections and the GOP's strong showing. Today, White House spokesman Robert Gibbs tried to downplay the results, saying voters focused on local issues. But the fact is, Democrats lost in 2 states where President Obama won last year. In New Jersey, Republican Chris Christie beat Governor John Corzine by 4 points. It wasn't even close in Virginia. Republican Robert McDonnell won by more than 17 points over Democrat Creed Deeds. However, Democrat Bill Owens did win a House seat in upstate New York that Republicans have held since 1872. That race got a lot of attention after several national figures, including Sarah Palin, backed the Conservative Party candidate. Here in New York City, billionaire Mayor Mike Bloomberg won a 3rd term, but his 5-point margin of victory was much closer than expected. And in Maine, 53% voted to repeal a new law that would have legalized same-sex marriages. So what does all this mean? For that, we turn to the best political team in the business. Bob Schieffer is chief Washington correspondent and the host of Face the Nation. Jeff Greenfield is our chief political correspondent. Jeff, the spend cycle is on overdrive today by both sides. But when you look at the results, what is your takeaway?
For me, the striking finding is the dramatic move of independents to the Republicans. You look at Virginia, where Obama and McCain split that independent vote. Last year, independents went 2-1 for Republican McDonald. In New Jersey, where Obama won independents in 2008, they went for Christie over Corzine 2-1. Now, this doesn't mean that voters were anti-Obama because neither Republican went after Obama. I think it really suggests this overriding sense of anxiety that the exit polls show. 89% in New Jersey, 85% in Virginia, worried about the economy, is going to make it really tough for the party in power that happens to be the Democrats.
Bob, you think it has a lot to do with the candidates as well?
I think what we saw last night were snapshots. I don't think we saw predictors. I mean, in Virginia, Obama won Virginia because he carried the urban-suburban vote in northern Virginia, the suburbs around Washington, and he got a big African-American turnout. So what did the Democrats do? They run someone for governor who is a rural candidate who's little known in northern Virginia and who could not seem to connect with the African-American voters. So he got beat, and he got beat bad. Most people thought that was going to happen, and it did. And in New Jersey, Corzine, the governor, was just so unpopular that I think he just didn't have a chance from the get-go. So I think these were races about New Jersey and Virginia. I don't think they told us much, except that people are very frustrated out in the country. The economy is bad, and when the economy is bad, that is never good for the party in power.
One of the surprising results last night was the victory in the 23rd Congressional District in upstate New York of a Democrat. The Republicans had held that seat for, 100 years? Is this a cautionary tale for the national GOP, Jeff, in a way?
It might be. It's a unique event because it was local Republican leaders who picked a candidate that was just too liberal on social and some economic issues for a lot of conservatives. And then you had a stream of Republicans, not just conservatives, but people like former New York Governor Pataki endorsing the Conservative Party candidate, I think, to get their bona fides, and that split that vote, and a Democrat walked in. I think it may be a little cautionary in terms of those conservatives who are anxious to challenge Republicans they regard as too moderate or too liberal.
Finally, Bob, what impact do you think these elections will have on health care legislation? Do you think some conservative Democrats might be a little more nervous about supporting it?
I think that's exactly right, Katie, and I think they're going to be more nervous about supporting it. If we do see any impact of these elections, I think it will be on the health care legislation, and it may set it back a bit.
All right, Bob Schieffer and Jeff Greenfield, gentlemen, thank you so much. And up next, he was a victim who decided to stand up for himself and put bullies in their place. And finally tonight, how do you handle bullies? Kelly Kobiea tells us one little boy found the perfect answer. He didn't fight or run away. He decided to educate. And he's tonight's example of the American spirit.
Jalen Arnold knows how it feels to be different. He's had Tourette's syndrome for most of his 9 years. It makes his body twitch, even though his brain is telling it to be still. Most times, Jalen can handle it.
It's some weird thing in your brain that just makes it.
Last February, Jalen's twitches got worse, much worse. It started when the kids at a new school began to bully him.
What did they say?
You're a weird kid. You should just go back to where you came from.
How did that make you feel?
Really sad. Real sad.
But Jalen did not run and hide.
What did you decide to do?
I made a website called jalenschallenge.org. It's about stopping bullying, and so far it's working.
The emails started coming in by the hundreds and probably thousands. And I said, this thing is taking off.
In fact, so many people were inspired by Jalen's story.
Absolutely, you got it! Yes!
That schools across the country wanted him to talk to their students and to their teachers, too.
I wanted to know, what advice do you have for bullies?
4 syllables. Sit down and stop bullying.
Great. Good answer.
With 4 words.
Jalen even caught the eye of Hollywood and actor Dash Mihok.
I saw this kid with Tourette's, this loving soul who was being absolutely incredibly brave, and it really touched me.
He was so touched that he flew out to meet Jalen.
Bullying, no way.
And lent his own star power to Jalen's cause. Dash knows how hard life can be for Jalen because he's been through it. Dash grew up with Tourette's too.
To have somebody inspire you to be who you are and be unapologetic about it, you know, it's beautiful.
In the 5 months since Jalen launched his website, he's given out more than 4,000 wristbands that say bullying no way to students and even a few stars.
What's your big, big, big dream?
To stop bullying forever.
That's a big dream.
Yes.
He has Tourette's to help other people. That's our answer.
You must be proud.
Super proud. He's the best kid.
Jalen can't change the way his body acts, but he's okay with that.
You get picked on anymore? No, because all my friends defended for me.
And that's a lesson everyone can applaud. Kelly Kobiella, CBS News, Lakeland, Florida.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.